the focus of session 5 is innovation and challenge. I think what was very good is Chris Ali identified all the mapping issues, so we're going to find a solution to those things. We're going to start with Josh Seidemann from Ntca. He's a co-chair with us in the NIST Ag Ruler, and he's going to talk about his latest report.
You know, we talked a little bit yesterday about Ntca, where they serve, how many members we have, their average service area size. We have a program within Ntca called Smart Rural Community, and the goal of the Smart Rural Community program is to start from the proposition that we've already got broadband to the ground, but to note that the broadband network is not enough. Really, what makes that broadband network valuable is exploiting its power and leveraging it to improve education, economic development, healthcare, ag, other vital services in rural communities, and that none of that takes place just within the office of the ISP, but it also requires not just collaboration, but active engagement, outreach, strategic thinking with other local leaders in the community. We push out this message through the SRC program in a few ways. We do awards programs. For a while, we were running some grant programs, but we do some educational programming as well. And we've periodically published reports, and I've placed the latest one on the tables for you. We don't take policy positions within the Smart Rural Community program. Ntca, as an advocacy organization, as a trade association, we are on Capitol Hill, we're at the FCC, we're at the federal agencies as well, and we do take advocacy positions there. The goal of the SRC program is to really just set out the data, and we'll help people connect the dots. And we do get to the point that more broadband is better, and more people using broadband is better than that. But the papers are really just kind of a just the facts man sort of presentation of some information. So what I will run through today are just some of the highlights of the report, just to set the stage for conversations that we might be able to have later. So this one we went through yesterday. I think we can skip over the size, this slide, but again, it's about 37% of the land mass of our members and 5% of the US population. I think that the last bar is what we try to push out through this program. Also, we want our companies to think of themselves not just as a service provider, but as a solutions provider. And that's whether it's for ag or education, for any other sector. When we take a look at US farm markets, and that's really what the goal of this paper is. I don't think that there's anyone here who's an expert. Anyone here who is an expert in ag tech, I don't think you're going to see anything surprising in this paper. The paper was really written to be as a primer to introduce people to what this notion is for ag tech. We did a paper a few years ago on telemedicine. I think people had this vague notion of what telehealth was and that it might be good, but we used that paper to kind of spin out and quantify the economic benefits of telehealth in rural spaces. So really just breezing through this slide, US farms contribute about $136 billion to the GDP. So we're talking about some pretty impressive numbers, and this is what we want to open up policymaker eyes to. We talk about net farm income in 2019 is reaching almost $70 billion. Cash crop receipts close to $200 billion. So these are the sorts of numbers that we think begin to resonate on Capitol Hill and with policymakers, and we explain to them why making sure that IoT and broadband can reach this industry is so important. It's a lot of job creation, big impact. The final bar on the bottom is that food represents 13% of US household expenditures. So these are numbers that matter, and that's what people care about on Capitol Hill is, what's the job impact? What's the impact on my constituents? Over time, farm sizes are decreasing. In 1935, the average US farm was 135 acres. In 2017, it grew to 444 acres. Farm productivity has about tripled between 1948 and 2015. But what you see is that the farms are growing. You have a lot of consolidation. About 15% of US farms control about 80% of the acreage. And this matters because when you're talking about the large farms, it's typically the larger farms are the first large adopters of ag tech technology. There's a fertile market. There's really a good reason to get involved in ag tech. Exports are still, US food exports are still exceeding our imports, although that gap is beginning to narrow, I think there's room to grow. We expect global food demand to grow by 70% between about 2010 and 2050. So what underlies the NTCA interest in ag tech? Certainly we serve a lot of rural areas. Certainly we have a lot of board members and directors of our member companies who are farmers. We sometimes receive declines to attend our meetings because it's calving season, or it's harvest, or they're planting. But overall, if you take a look at a farm, that farm needs a strong community on which to rely for its family. So the farmer has a spouse, the farmer has children. You need to make sure that there's opportunities for off-farm income, that there's opportunities for healthcare in the community, opportunities for education as well. And all of those sectors, again, rely on broadband for either education or for telehealth services, particularly in communities where there might be a shortage of health specialists, or there may be a greater distance to healthcare facilities. So ag really then becomes just another one of those many industries into which broadband is becoming incorporated on an increasing basis. I'm not going to go through the different examples of ag tech that's in the paper in terms of what can be used for crops and for animal production, but I do want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about adoption. And this is something that we touched upon in the last panel in terms of adoption by age, adoption by income, adoption by educational attainment. So really what we're doing here is only looking at ag tech adoption. The biggest number is that the larger the farm, the more likely it is to adopt ag tech. And there are some reasons for that. The larger farms may be able to better afford the capital costs of investing in ag tech. They might have better economies of scale. They might have larger farming areas over which to implement the technology. It might not be cost efficient to implement certain of the technology on a small farm. But there are other factors that we think play into ag tech adoption as well. The first one is age. By and large, what we're seeing is that while the smallest share of broadband adoption is in the 65 plus population, broadband adoption generally is beginning to increase across all age categories and begins to plateau in the mid to high 90s. Now, my thinking is that for the 65 plus crowd, that will also plateau at the mid to high 90s. And it might take a few years to get there, but it's a very simple reason. As I look around this room, I don't think that in 20 or 30 years, when all of us get to be a little bit older, we're suddenly going to decide, I'm done, I don't need connectivity anymore. So there has been a curve to get older Americans online, but that curve is going to go up. And then I think it's going to plateau again in the mid to high 90s, no different than telephone service, which achieved a connectivity rate of, I think, 98.5% when the FCC was still measuring that. Educational attainment also speaks to broadband adoption. And there are a few inputs there as well. The first one is a number of studies demonstrate that the higher one's educational attainment, the higher one's income. Income speaks to affordability. Affordability speaks to adoption. There are reports, however, that say that it's not as simple. One of the other approaches that a report takes is that, well, those who are inclined to pursue higher education are those who are inclined to pursue new technologies and to adopt them. So there's no cut and dry answer here. In terms of farmers, however, the average age of farmers is now about 1.2 years higher than it was a couple of years ago. But again, I don't see that as a problem for adoption, because I do think that the age-related adoption issue is going to resolve itself over the next decade. And then in terms of educational attainment in rural areas is increasing steadily. So the number of rural Americans who have a high school diploma is higher now than it was 25 years ago. The number of rural Americans who have college degrees is a higher proportion now than it was 20 years ago, and so on and so forth with advanced education. So if we're pinning educational attainment to broadband adoption or technology adoption, that too is beginning to look at a good story for rural areas. In terms of the policy implications, we've mentioned here a couple of times, it showed up, I think, in the Aerostat as well. In any wireless technology, and certainly we need a wireless technology to support the sensors and the IoT in the field, we do need wired technology to provide the backhaul and to provide that connection back into the hardline network. In terms of agriculture, it can be important as well for farmers in their office who are going to use a wired or a high capacity, low latency connection for, say, an online cattle auction or for commodities trading. The FCC has recognized this. We're going to hear later from one of the leaders of the FCC Precision Ag Task Force. I've had the opportunity for the past couple of years to work on one of the working groups, but it shows that this really is receiving attention at high level agencies within the government. USDA issued a report about a year and a half ago that began to spell out the financial benefits of greater broadband deployment that would then support ag tech. And I don't think that we can leave without talking about cybersecurity. It is affecting every industry. For ag tech particularly, I think that this is going to be an increasing and growing field as ag tech and IoT technology gets introduced. The threats will increase. There'll be threats to food supply, disruptions to blockchain, simple things like theft of data or corruption of data that could affect crop insurance rates. We can think about automated systems for feeding or irrigation and how those could be corrupted. We can think about herd health data, where someone could corrupt the data and indicate to a farmer that there's an illness in the herd that needs to be segregated and part of the herd needs to be put down. If that information is false or unverified, you've suddenly just implicated a terrific loss. So something to pay attention to as we get excited about ag tech. On the other side, paying attention to cybersecurity for that field as well is going to be critical. Thank you very much. My contact information, and I'm going to leave it to Mo to call up the next speaker.
You saw this presentation this morning by Johnny Park, CEO, regarding the overall WHIN network. Now, Greg Jarman is he's a technical guy, but all the magic that goes behind the scene. So we have a chance to sort of get an update from Greg about what is the Aerostat, some of the technical stuff that they're looking at and questions that were raised. Thanks.
My background a little bit is I'm an operator. I spent the last 30 years of my career developing network systems. My initial experience was with dial-up internet in the 90s. And, you know, we speak about broadband in a variety of different terms. And for me, I have been an operator who has gone through dial-up to DSL to wireless and fiber, just kind of all kinds of technologies. And I can say that the quality of life improvement that happened for many people was more significant when they got a 56K connection for the first time on dial-up than it was the iterative improvements that happened since. And so as you leap forward to where we are today, from an operator's perspective, it's been fascinating to watch that quality of life improvement happen. But as you look at it today, and this is not the topic of my conversation, but it's things that I've kind of gleaned from the mapping conversation. We're all in search of fairness. The mapping is all about fairness. For the operator, it's fairness on where money's going to go. And for the resident, it's fairness of where service is going to find. But I still go back to those 56K dial-up days and think that the quality of life improvement happens today more from somebody you're taking from a 1 meg connection to a 25 or a 50 meg connection than it is somebody with a 50 meg connection and moving them to a gigabit connection. So food for thought. My background completely from an operational standpoint until I joined WHIN in January. Okay. And just a little bit reminder of WHIN. Johnny shared this morning. We're a nonprofit, and our goal is to provide a prosperous ecosystem that supports the 10 counties that we serve. And that prosperous ecosystem is broadband, but broadband from a standpoint that it's supporting advanced innovative solutions that ultimately support our core competencies of ag and manufacturing as it relates to the important parts of the 10 counties we're in. As Johnny also said, that we found that if you're going to do sensoring technology, you cannot leave internet behind. And as we started delving into the 10 counties that we work with, we started seeing those huge gaps that have been talked about this morning. So we took this ag and manufacturing alliance model of bringing in innovative technology and we applied it to broadband. So today, as you look at this graphic, the community that we're talking about, those are the cities, the towns, the stakeholders in each of these counties that we have very intimate relationships with. The commercial partners that we have from a broadband perspective are companies like Telrad and Ericsson and service providers. We develop relationships with them, and then we take those products, marry them with the communities in a regional aspect, and we try to make meaningful projects that are going to bring services and solutions to the people that live in these 10 county regions. And then we learn from it. We provide that data to learn and see how we can duplicate this, how we can do it better. So it's a very unique approach. I think that the innovation that we're doing right now with the Aerostat is fantastic, and it's thrilling and exciting, and it's fun. But the innovation in the partnering and the strategic planning and the things that we're doing in order to bring a region together is as innovative as anything else that we're doing. And I think that's very important to understand. In order to get into broadband, the first, what kind of drug us into that was we authorized a regional connectivity gap study. And this study was initiated and funded by WHIN. And I was working with the company that actually won the project to do the study. And so I was with a company called Watch Communications. I was the chief operating officer and was working closely with Johnny and his team. We won that opportunity, and it has been completed, but it was the catalyst to say you have to invest in broadband if you're going to be successful in the sensoring technology. You just have to invest in that. So this grant set the stage for our Broadband Alliance initiatives, and that whole approach was born from that. One of the first things we've done is, because of the pandemic, we invested $6 million. We allocated $6 million on a 3-year project to the school districts in the 10 county region. The first year we've allocated $2 million tranche in the WHIN region, and we're supporting 29 different school corporations. Now, what that means is we're just funding Wi-Fi devices with the cellular carriers in order for students who need access and have needed access, whether it's for affordability reasons or serviceability reasons, they can use those Wi-Fi devices and gain some internet access. But our ultimate goal here is to take those funds in year 2. So what happens in year 2 is, how do we take those funds and make those as hardened investments in technology that actually provides long-term benefit to the school corporation? So that may be taking that same investment in year 2 and providing it to a service provider, or bringing some of the county's funds that they have in alignment with some of the RDOF winners and expanding their service territory. Our goal is to use those partnerships to drive additional resources, to drive additional service. So what happens in years 2 is to be determined. We're working on that right now, but we fully expect that we'll take projects, duplicate those across the region, and fill in these gaps that we talk about. So the Broadband Alliance, like I said, we bring technology in, we vet it, we bring them in as tech partners. We align them just like manufacturers and farmers in the Ag Alliance and Manufacturing Alliance. We bring in service providers and manufacturers of broadband equipment, and we bring that all together with the community in order to drive opportunities for growth in broadband in the community. I have to say that, you know, you can't lose sight of both the broadband and the narrowband when we are in this conversation. As an operator, when you're deploying rural broadband on a tower or any kind of vertical asset, whether it's a water tower, a cell tower, a building, a tall grain elevator, it's a rounding error. It's literally a rounding error to add IoT services at the same time you're deploying broadband services. And so from a financing standpoint, we've advocated that that should be a part of any funding that goes out in the future in the state or at the federal level, to say that needs to be considered as a part of the funding. Because if I were to do this without doing broadband at the same time, the costs are astronomical. So it makes sense to do it at the same time. So WHIN is focused on both broadband and narrowband initiatives. The way we got started with that is we started evaluating where is the counties today, and all 10 counties we've studied where are they with broadband. We've studied where are the gaps. We've looked at the maps like this one that was kind of the RDOF map up front, what was available. We studied the narrowband and what services were available and what services weren't. We found that really very little service was available for either LoRaWAN or any other Bluetooth or NB-IoT. Very few services are available in the rural markets today. So our goal as a part of this initiative is to bring 100 by 20 minimum services to all 10 counties, everywhere, wherever you live. And that's a minimum speed. We're not focused simply on wireless. We're looking at fiber initiatives. We're looking at wireless initiatives, and so it's the right tool set for the right situation. We have RDOF winners that have won significant funds in the 10 counties we have, but we probably won't see some of those be constructed for 7 years. Their long forms haven't been approved. It may be six months before they are, and then they have another 6 months to finish, 6 years to finish construction. So it's a message, and there was a presentation earlier that showed the cost of wireless versus fiber. Most of those projects are fiber projects. So what do we do in this interim period? And I think that there is going to be blocks where it makes sense for us to deploy wireless, fill in those gaps, and even when fiber comes to town, it won't hit every house on every street. Wireless will still have a play, and the NB-IoT or the LoRaWAN or at least the narrowband solution will be deployed at the same time. And there's a residual value from that effort, a residual benefit from that effort. So how are we going about this, this minimum of 120 and LoRaWAN for sensors throughout? First was leadership and coordination to accelerate deployments. We're creating an environment where counties can be more proactive because they lack the education on the very minutia to be able to figure this out. I showed one county where $6 million had been awarded in their county, and they didn't even know the name of any of the companies that actually had won money. They'd never heard of any of them before. Okay, never heard of them. How are they going to hold those companies accountable to make sure they get what should be going there? And they're not alone. These folks don't have the resources to follow every state offering, every federal auction, every USDA grant. They just don't have the resources. So providing that leadership and coordination in a regional effort is what my job is. I am the watchdog of making sure that people are deploying in the areas that they're supposed to be deploying on. And I'm also on the stick and the carrot, right? We're creating an environment for you to build here first, so we're not waiting 6 years. And we're also the stick to say, you haven't built here, why haven't you? So that's the leadership and coordination that we're trying to do to accelerate deployments. And then we're making direct investments to projects for innovative solutions. Here's an example of the leadership that WHIN, I think, has provided that's very, very important and very visible. The state of Indiana has a broadband readiness program, and those on the April side, April 2021, you can see that outlined of the WHIN region in the northwestern portion of Indiana. And we worked with the state of Indiana, excuse me, state of Indiana, to allow WHIN to help these counties to be their task force. Each county, in order to be designated as a broadband ready community, they have to have a task force assigned and be able to respond to service providers' needs and issues. So we worked with each of these counties. We are now helping them with their task force. We sit on that task force and we help drive that task force. So now all 10 counties from April to June are now broadband ready in the state of Indiana. That's just a small portion of the leadership that WHIN can provide. Another person, and I don't remember who it was, so I apologize, talked about getting the counties involved, and then another talked about regional deployment. And we fully believe that a regional deployment methodology makes great sense. Fiber rarely goes from one point in a county to another point, and that's where it gets on the internet. That's a rarity in rural America. It's usually got some long haul tendencies to it. Most of the fiber in the state of Indiana goes from a rural community, ends up in either Chicago or downtown Indianapolis at Henry Street. And then from there, it hops onto the net. So regional deployment, partnering with fiber providers across multiple counties, provides a better benefit. So that's a little bit about the leadership. This is just a little oversight of one of our counties, some of the funds that they won, and most have heard of Comcast, right? That's a pretty common name. Most have not heard of Mercury Wireless. But we have communities that have won significant dollars from companies they've never even heard of. Everywhere. Yeah, absolutely. So from a regional connectivity cultivation fund, we talked about the engineering plan that we put together. We talked about how we're investing dollars into e-learning and ultimately not just into services, but into hardened assets that provide services. But this living lab that we've created over these 10 counties allows us to do what I told you earlier: bring in quality, innovative products, put them to real use, and then create use cases for research and additional education. That's our model. So one of our first projects, we did this while I was at Watch. I worked with WHIN. I worked with Co-Alliance is a local grain operator, Land of Lakes, and Microsoft. And we used this facility to deploy broadband from the grain elevator at the top there. At the time, the Co-Alliance was seeing at best 10 meg service offerings at some of their business plans. There's 5 businesses on that piece of property with 5 different connections. And the best one they were getting was 10 meg. Some of them were 5 meg, depending on the tree line and the service that they were getting. We negotiated with them to guarantee 50 meg connection at most, and up to 100 meg connection at a couple. And they agreed to a long-term relationship to that. Gave Watch access to the grain elevator. And that was the catalyst to say, all right, we can now deploy 50 meg services to around 2,000 residents in the surrounding area, where before there wasn't a business model to do that. This grain elevator has been sitting there for, 50 years, and nobody's ever used it as a service to the customers around them. So that was the first project that we did at WHIN, and now we're duplicating that. We've got fiber to the home projects that we're working through. We've got a community where it's a blended solution, both fiber and wireless. We've got new innovative technology coming in to see how we can use TV white space. And can it be deployed successfully in certain regions where terrain is incredibly challenging. So that's as innovative as our Aerostat is, and we'll talk about that in a moment. What we're trying to do at the ground level with relationships with partners, with service providers, with funding agents, bringing them together for the common good in a regional area. I think that's as innovative as anything that we're doing technically. At the same time, we've deployed gateways throughout the 10 counties. We have LoRaWAN gateways across the 10 counties. It is available for our research arms of Purdue and Ivy Tech, but it's also a commercially available project. And so we have now, gateways that can drive some of our ag and manufacturing tech partners to use those products in the field in a commercial way. We partnered with a group called Senate. Senate is a large LoRaWAN based network that's scattered across the US today. And that this also gives our ag and manufacturing partners more of a national network that they can hop on once we vet their products and services. The Aerostat we see is a canopy. And this is the compound of the Aerostat. This is early in the construction phase. You have to understand with WHIN, this was a bean field. And the process and the engineering and the work that the team had to go through for the company that is our size is extraordinary. The acquisition of the property, the permitting of this was significant. The coordination with the FAA, we're in the flight path of both Indianapolis, Wright Pat, and Chicago. So the FAA coordination and permitting we had to go through was significant. We turned this bean field into a compound. Built the fence, leveled the ground. It's very impressive, and for those you get to go tomorrow, we'll get you up close and personal. But the Aerostat is an 80-foot balloon. Johnny talked about it a little bit this morning. I'll give you a little bit more of the technical details behind it. It's an 80-foot balloon. It has, if you look on the front of that, you can see a blue winch. That blue winch holds a hybrid cable. That hybrid cable carries fiber optics. It's Kevlar, so it's strong and it can hold the weight of the Aerostat in high winds, and it carries power. So I now have the ability through different waves on fiber. We're pushing a gig up there, 1,500 feet in the air today, but different optics, I can push 10 gig, I can push 40 gig, I can push 100 gig. So the bottleneck no longer is the top of the tower. We have the ability to really drive high connectivity, 1,500 feet or greater in the air. Our FAA permit is to be at 1,500 feet, but there's nothing preventing this to go 2,000 or 2,500 feet. So as we go through testing, there will probably be an engineering expectation or an engineering calculation that tells us where is the sweet spot for a particular terrain and how high do you need to go, and we'll adjust that permit and ask for different permits depending on the regions which we go to. But this, to me, when I got started with this was one of maybe cautious optimism. I'm an operator, and it just seemed a little crazy to me that you're going to be able to put radios up at 1,500 feet floating around on a balloon. And then when you start understanding that each one of these engineering feats are just something we're already using somewhere else in industry, we're just packaging them together for a unique use case. And all there is some great ingenuity, and I'll point to some of those. one of those things is things that I didn't think about. If you go back to this picture, and it may be a little bit hard to see, but this is sitting on what's called a mooring trailer right now. That mooring trailer it looks just like a trailer with wheels, and you can hook it to the back of a truck and you can haul it around. You don't haul it around with the balloon inflated, right? But you can haul it around and move it to another location if you so chose, right? But that mooring trailer has to be able to spin 360 degrees. Okay. As winds change, the balloon in the air will spin 360 degrees. When it's on the ground, when the balloon moves, the mooring trailer moves. Okay. So when you start thinking about that, then you have to start realizing that as the mooring trailer moves, your fiber is being negatively impacted. And so you have to have forges in there to be able to allow this thing to move and not lose fiber connectivity. Fascinating technologies that are in here. And when you look at it from a scope that we're doing this at, it seems incredible, but these are just products that are being used in many industries around the world today. It's just being put to this use case. So just being able to take that winch and turn that fiber and raise that aerostat into the air and still not lose connectivity as the light's shooting into the side is a feat that I take no credit for. This is a picture I took from underneath the balloon. You can see the balloon there on the left. This is the same picture. If you see that dark circle underneath the aerostat, the dark ring, kind of oval ring at the bottom, that is called a ballonnet. And inside the aerostat, there's helium. There is this stomach inside that aerostat that contains just air. And helium has natural tendencies to leak slowly through this material over the course of weeks. And so there's plenty of helium in there to keep it in the air for a fairly long period of time. But the important thing is that the aerostat maintains its form. So there are devices on the aerostat to fill that ballonnet up so that the pressure is stabilized inside the aerostat so it never loses its form. If it doesn't lose its form, it has about a 2-degree change in its elevation. So just a little bit of rock is all it does. For me as an operator, that movement of the aerostat was my greatest concern about my cautious optimism. That was what was making me most cautious, is that movement. But when this is maintaining its form, it faces into the wind and has just a 2-degree change. At 1,500 feet, as an operator, the fringe is what you're looking at, is the problem. If you have a 2-degree change, it's going to change your fringe out 50 miles on LoRaWAN, and maybe you change your fringe out at 20 miles with your fixed wireless. A 2-degree change at 50 miles really has no measurable impact. So the fact that we can hold it steady, even in high winds, is part of what makes this very interesting. What we can't do, though, is force it to stay in the same direction all day, every day. I've seen it move a full 360 degrees in less than a minute. Okay, so as you zoom in on this, you can start to see the payload. This may be a little bit hard to see. People here, these are antennas that are coming down. This is the belly of the aerostat. That's where the payload is today. You'll get an up close and personal look at that tomorrow. In front of that, the ring at the top is where flight control systems control that balance of air inside the system and measures the air inside the system. So if it gets a little light on the pressure, it's automatically refilled. Just another look. You can kind of see coming off right here to the left of the picture, that is the tether. That is that Kevlar tether with the fiber and the power going up into it. Once that gets into the payload at the bottom there, it hits a flight control system, hits a power system, and we can power over Ethernet any kind of radio that we need to, or we can offer DC power as well to radios that require a DC power solution. Okay. Our goal here, though, is to provide a canopy over those other ground LoRaWAN radios. We think that we can get a very, very high penetration rate at 1,500 feet for 50 miles plus. We've done some measurements, and we'll be able to hear signal as far as 65 miles away, depending on what that fringe looks like from a tree standpoint. But providing an ultimate canopy over the existing ground solutions is a big benefit, and basically doing the exact same thing from a fixed broadband standpoint. We have RDOF winners, about 2 miles north of here, that they don't have the need to spend money to build out in this area. But if we can, from a neutral host position, provide this as a service that they can use in order to get more subscribers and put more investment in our counties, we're meeting the goals and the objectives of our regional deployment. And lastly, we see that, and this is to be tested. One of the challenges of the Aerostat I mentioned is that movement of 360 degrees at any one time. It's a challenge because the fiber is constantly twisting, and so we have to account for that. It's a challenge because the radios that are servicing customers are constantly moving. We are working on a gimbal solution that comes off the bottom of the Aerostat that would then hold an azimuth in the horizon on a fixed point of position. That then allows us to introduce CBRS as a solution, or other FCC licensed spectrums that require you to hold an azimuth with the spectrum that you're using. We're starting with unlicensed bands to begin with. We have 5.8 with Telrad going up. We have LoRaWAN unlicensed spectrum going up, and we fully expect that will create propagational aspects that will teach us and educate us truly how to hold this in a fixed position and how to best engineer the gimbal that's going to allow other technologies to be deployed on there as well. There's not any frequency other than TV white space that I'm aware of that would be restricted. TV white space has a height restriction, but I'm not aware, and I could be missing one or two. I'm not aware of any other spectrum that we couldn't use it at 1,500 feet for this purpose. You have to own the license, if it's a licensed product, but we keep in mind, part of our mission here is to bring meaningful products and services to serve the community that we're in, but also to learn from it and generate innovation that then spurns the industry to do even more and invest in our region to do those tests and that research. So there's nothing would prevent us from using that specific frequency on this device. There's my email address. Feel free to reach out. I work very closely with Pat Corey. She's our VP of engagement and has been a blessing to me in this engagement of broadband in the 10 counties. And I think that between the innovation of how we go about what we're doing and the innovative products that we're bringing to the table and the partners that we're bringing to the table, Telrad is gracious to donate equipment for us to be able to deploy this and to test it. We've had service providers donate equipment for us to be able to test this. And ultimately, what the service providers want is they want to be able to use this vertical asset at 1,500 feet in order to gain customers. And that's what we want to do.
What are the plans for disaster recovery, secondary options?
Yeah. Well, we didn't talk a lot about the durability of this. I mentioned before, this is not new technology. The aerostats have been in the air over Iraq and in war zones for decades. For decades. And so they are incredibly durable in inclement weather. They're safer in the air than they are on the ground because there's nothing for them to bump into up there. Okay. Grounding is a concern on how you ground something like this, and we work through that. So I think it's to be seen, but maintenance, I've been an operator. I can bring this down from 1,500 feet and have it on the ground quicker than I can have a climber climb the tower 1,100 feet. We owned a tower 1,100 feet tall, and it would take 45 minutes for a climber to get to the top of an 1,100 foot tower. So from a maintenance perspective, it's quicker, it's safer, and then you're operating with your feet on the ground as opposed to strapped to a tower at 1,100 feet. So it has all kinds of different benefits. Truth, the facts will tell. Do those benefits outweigh the potential negatives that floating around at 1,500 feet might bring?
Greg, you talk about weather related. Obviously, wind is going to play a big influence on this. Is there a wind limitation that the balloon is in danger? I mean, what wind speed can you stay up there at, and at what wind speed do you have to pull it down?
Yeah, it's made to, and the tether is capable of handling any wind speed. So the Kevlar cable is capable of handling it. There's certainly tornadic type events could cause us to bring it down. But normal high winds, 50, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour are not going to be problematic. The swirling winds traditionally happen at the ground, and you get 400 feet in the air, and that becomes more of a jet stream, much more easier to manage from that standpoint up in the air.
The next presenter is Julie Bushell from Paige Wireless, and she's been very active in FCC Precision Ag.
I'm Julie Bushell, president of Paige Wireless. We are a LoRaWAN network provider, as well as what we like to call mission critical broadband provider for precision agriculture. Our company has built a fully redundant LoRaWAN network across the state of Nebraska, really for precision agriculture. So the updates that I'll share with you today from our FCC task force are certainly near and dear to our heart, but also for everyone involved in precision ag. So many of you know the FCC Precision Ag Task Force was a statutory task force that was implemented in the 2018 Farm Bill. We are coming up on our 2 years of service, and our current, what I will call administration, will be changing the end of December. This particular task force was broken into 4 working groups. The working groups are separated by accelerating deployment on unserved ag lands, mapping and analyzing connectivity on ag lands, examining current and future connectivity demand for precision ag, and encouraging adoption of precision agriculture and availability of high quality jobs on connected farms. And that's the working group that I get to serve on with Josh Seidemann and Dr. Dennis Buckmaster. So in perfect timing, what I get to share with you today is actually a draft report of the executive summary that was presented to the task force on July 7th. I have to mention this is not voted on nor approved as our executive summary for the report, but it will give you a very good idea of all of the key highlights that you'll be seeing come December in our final work. And first and foremost, the task force recommends the improvement of federal broadband maps to consistently validate user experiences. So this would recommend the FCC and the USDA to begin working immediately to derive a public-facing FCC broadband availability map to confirm unserved and underserved areas on ag lands. Also, the most recent map for ag producers should be hosted within the ARS website, and include the base layers of NAS cropland data and USGS data on rangelands. With respect to broadband data collection, a uniform set of practices and validation processes should be developed by the FCC, including crowdsourcing data to validate, along with ground testing mechanisms to verify the quality of service. And finally, under mapping, we recommend that the broadband availability and quality data be independently verified. And this would be a pretty significant shift in where we are today. We've also recommended that incentives, increase incentives to build out a robust infrastructure. I know within our own encouraging adoption work group, we spent a lot of time focused on this. What all of the working groups really came to terms with is we need to make sure we're promoting that precision agriculture requires both terrestrial, non-terrestrial, fixed and mobile applications, as well as fiber. And I feel we've done quite a good job getting some visibility into that. Also, the FCC should work with the USDA and relevant agencies to increase and create incentives for specific types of build out. So this is a very significant shift from the way we see current funding or broadband funding going to just the home and business. This essentially is recommending that funding be looked at for rural agricultural headquarter facilities, expansion of middle mile infrastructure, and deployment of the local or last acre network facilities for precision ag systems and devices. A third recommendation is to enhance the high-speed standards to meet the technological needs in agriculture. We can all, Dennis, Josh, and I can speak to this pretty intently. We have spent quite a bit of time working on what are the standards in which precision ag requires. So is that 100 by 100, which is what our working group has recommended. You will see here, that is not an official recommendation to the task force today. I will share with you, I believe by the next meeting and by the end of our term, you will see the Examining Current and Future Connectivity Demand Working Group present a formal standard for precision agriculture. We've also recommended that improved collaboration between federal agencies and to remove regulatory impediments. And since our last task force meeting, there has been an announcement of increased collaboration between the FCC, the USDA, and the Ntca. So as a task force, we're certainly supportive of that. And a key component here that I think will certainly help drive precision ag adoption is that we would like to see the USDA, the NAS, FSA, RMA, and the NRCS allow for e-filing. So if we're doing our job in promoting and incentivizing precision ag adoption, producers should also be able to e-file. And let's see, finally, increase digital access to education and training for individuals engaged in farming. This was actually our working group's recommendation that state, local, and federal agencies increase STEM funding and digital vocational programs for K through 12 community colleges focused on technology, cybersecurity, manufacturing careers in agriculture. And finally, a few more key components to the work that we will be concluding is because agriculture and the supply chain is a multi-stakeholder supply chain, that interoperability must be established and an imperative for standards in precision agriculture. Traceability through the supply chain requires interoperability to verify data as it moves from product and changes hands through processors and ultimately to the consumer or to the end user. We also recommend that priority be placed on developing precision agriculture cybersecurity specialist. That initiative we'd like to be looked at the USDA, Department of Homeland Security, and through President Biden's New American Jobs Plan. In conclusion, we will have, I suspect, our encouraging adoption of precision ag, some key components that'll get added to this executive summary and that we're working on now, which you'll see a stronger report around data privacy. I know our group certainly believes that if producers feel their data is protected, they will be more apt to adopt precision agriculture. And I also did mention the key change we'll see with actually including a broadband standard for precision agriculture prior to our final report in December.
Thank you very much for the update. I think it's very exciting to see the progress, and I'm sure we're all looking to get more of those policies and things, because I think it's critical for long run.
It is. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think the next speaker is Shawn Irvine from City of Independence. Shawn is one of our partners in the leadership of the GCTC Ag Ruler Economic Development. He inviting all of us on Independence Day to go visit him because they have all kind of big party on the City of Independence. They've been looking a lot. So he's put together a session regarding some innovation in Oregon that he's going to share with us. Shawn, please go ahead. You can share.
Thank you, Mo. It's great to be here, and yeah, definitely everybody is always welcome to come to Independence on Independence Day. We're a town of about 10,000 people in Oregon's Mid-Willamette Valley, about an hour and 15 minutes south of Portland. And yeah, we're a town of about 10,000 people, and we get about 25,000 people for our fireworks show on the 4th of July. So it gets a little busy. We're a town of about 10,000 people, agriculturally focused in the Mid-Willamette Valley. But we built out a municipal fiber system with our neighboring city of Monmouth back in 2007. So we've really kind of been leveraging fiber broadband for a long time, and it's just, I kind of want to talk a little bit about how we're using that to create opportunity, and that potentially kind of could be a model for other communities to leverage fiber. So I'm the economic development director for the City of Independence. My job is to bring new business, help existing businesses start, and kind of develop the community, and that's kind of the traditional approach to economic development. You recruit businesses, you do business retention and expansion, and you also work on community development. But being a small town, we've got to think of different ways to do things. We don't have the staff that larger cities do, and so we've kind of taken a slightly different approach. And in this case, we really believe that economic development is a holistic perspective here. We take a holistic approach to it. That means we have to have good parks, we have to have good schools, we have to have a proud and engaged residents, we have to have an accessible government, and a revitalized downtown. You have to have that overall quality of life that makes people want to come to the community and makes businesses want to be there as well. And broadband touches on all of that. It really is impressive how that broadband connectivity really does touch on all aspects of the quality of life and the overall enhancement of a community. So just a few things about us. We really have an entrepreneurial mindset. We embrace change. We believe anything is possible. We're willing to take risks, calculated risks. If you can't really get very far if you don't. But we're also very collaborative. We seek out collaborative opportunities because, again, we're a small town. We're one deep at every position, and we can only do so much. So we have to find partner organizations to work with to be able to get more done. But most importantly, we always have an eye on the big picture. We've reached out to our community regularly. We've set a vision for the community of where we want to go. And so everything we do has that vision in mind in terms of how is this project, how is this thing going to help us get, farther down that road towards where we as a community want to get to. And we're also, this community is led by the values of being open and approachable. We're grounded, we're collaborative. This is about farmers, workers, business owners, everybody, outside organizations, everybody working together to promote growth. We cannot do this in isolation or siloed or with one group within the community being the only ones driving change. We all have to be in this together, which is why we spend so much effort, engaging the community, seeing what they need, what they want, and trying to make that happen. And so that way we all work together to promote growth because we can leverage that community engagement, that interest, that excitement to create new opportunities that I might never have thought of. And so we do take this yes mentality towards opportunities. If there's an opportunity, we try to figure out how to make it happen. And again, broadband is critical to all of this. This idea of a government that is engaging and accessible to the community. Broadband is a critical part of that, making sure everybody's on the same footing and able to have equal access to the community, to their local government. So, like I said, we built out this fiber system in 2007, and it's kind of, it's like, okay, well, what do we do with it? And again, I'm an economic development guy. We're a rural community that is looking to, kind of be on the right side of the digital divide, leverage the digital economy. So, how do we do this? And really, we've taken several approaches, but primarily it's the idea of becoming a hub for innovation and development of largely agricultural technologies, because we have that connection to rural agriculture. We have proximity to Oregon State University, to Portland, where there's and Eugene, where there's pretty sizable tech hubs for our state. So it's a good fit for us. And being a small town, we're agile, we're well aligned, we can make things happen quickly. So the idea is get out there, find some partners who want to do something. Let's see if we can be an interface between urban agriculture and rural technology. But, we want to do that to create jobs, create opportunity locally. That's bringing business to the community, but that's also helping our farmers be more competitive, because if our farmers are more competitive and more profitable, that helps our regional economy, which helps our community also. And then the other piece that we definitely don't want to forget is we need to bring our youth along. Our youth are, the workers and the business owners and the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. So we need to make sure they're prepared and have the skills to engage in the digital economy and find these high wage jobs and create these new opportunities that will help our community, kind of bridge that gap and lead into the digital future, instead of, kind of having to chase to catch up. So we're always looking for those collaborative opportunities to do these things. And we're always trying to center it around our downtown, because small towns live and die with their downtowns. And so we're trying to center these activities in our downtown to promote that downtown vibrancy, and really just kind of tie it to, tightly to the community itself. So how do we go about doing this? We go about it by trying to build an ecosystem. We've started hosting a lot of ag tech meetups, pretty simple events. Get a bunch of people together, offer free pizza and beer, talk about a topic of agriculture and or technology, and then just chat afterwards. And it's really impressive, the diversity of people that we've gotten in terms of farmers and technologists and government people and university people, all in the same room, listening, learning, and then especially interacting and engaging, after the official program is done. We've done events like Startup Weekend, which is an entrepreneurship development, just trying to get people thinking about starting new businesses, tackling problems, because a lot of it is just kind of this idea of sort of presenting agriculture to the technology world, because they don't know a lot about it. They don't know, they're off in the city and they know it's there, but they don't really know any of the problems, any of the issues. They don't think about it. So how do we get people thinking about these challenges, these problems, so they can potentially start coming up with some solutions? And most importantly, we need to connect people to people, because if you are an entrepreneur with an idea, where do you go to get plugged in? Where do you go to find a farmer who's interested in talking about your your solution? How do you find somebody who's willing to pilot it? So that's sort of the ecosystem building part. We've been able to do a number of pilot projects that kind of demonstrate what's possible. We did a virtual situation room, actually managing our 4th of July event to kind of monitor things and keep everything moving smoothly. We did a pretty large pilot project with Intel, monitoring the blueberry crop from field all the way to the final distribution center at the pallet level, environmental conditions, all that, and then monitoring the handoffs with blockchain, so that you kind of had an authenticated path all the way through the supply chain. So it's really just kind of build excitement, show what's possible, get people connected, and then try to funnel them into kind of programs and opportunities to build these businesses, build these connections. And again, we want to keep these kids involved. We want to keep the kids, coming up and engaging in this ecosystem that we're building. So we were, this is again, part of that engagement is we had partners who got excited. And so the library developed a mobile makerspace, and a youth workforce development organization brought a mobile makerspace to town. That generated enough interest that the community came together and funded a permanent makerspace for youth workforce development. It essentially runs youth with barriers to education and employment through this makerspace on an entrepreneurship program. Come up with a business idea, come up with a product, make the product at the makerspace, and then build a business plan around that, around selling that product. That's essentially this curriculum that they're teaching. That's been really successful, and it's morphed interestingly because it's a very agile system, and it's turned into a essentially almost like a small scale kind of consumer product production shop. So like you see the little coaster on the bottom right there, I told them, I said, hey, I need something that's a giveaway that I can give people that sort of, that that's branded but that's interesting. And so they made me these wood coasters with the laser etcher, they're turning into sort of a custom product development shop for people who need branded merchandise to give away for certain things. And they're learning how to run that as a business. So they're getting even more diverse experience in terms of, working with customers and zeroing in on what the customer really wants, and then actually doing it and making it, figuring out how much it costs, and, all of those aspects of running a business as well. And it's been successful enough that they've now gotten a contract to run a lot of the alternative education for the high school in town. And they're also running summer school programs. This was largely pre-COVID, but they did keep going during COVID, and they're starting to spin back up again, which is really exciting. Continuing on education, again, this is a holistic thing. We need the whole community involved. We need the whole community learning, and being able to take advantage of the opportunity that this broadband presents for us. So, our library is a critical resource within our community. It's a community of 10,000 people. We get 100,000 people going through our library every year. And, obviously that's a lot of duplicates, but still that's a ton of people. They have a lot of programming, again, pre-COVID, that's beginning to spin up again. So first off, we got free Wi-Fi there. A lot of people go to use the Wi-Fi, they use the computer center because they just don't have that access in their homes. Even during COVID, there was literally a guy that would sit out, bring his lawn chair and sit out behind the library and Zoom with his family down in Mexico, like every week or so. It was kind of cool to see how people were using this Wi-Fi to stay connected during COVID. Like I mentioned, the mobile makerspace, the library got a grant to develop it. So they have regular programming. You can see, Tuesday Tech Fun, and they had, Maker Mondays where they're teaching, makerspace curriculum, and it's ostensibly for kids, come in here and mess around with Ozobots and squishy circuits and whatnot. But the parents come, and inevitably the parents are kind of getting right in there with the kids and learning along with it. So it's a great way for everybody to kind of get exposed to STEM education, to coding, to to some of this technology that may spark an interest, in some of them to pursue it, more significantly. The library also loans out those kits, so if you want to mess around with Ozobots more, you can borrow them and take them home. They've started loaning out Wi-Fi hotspots. They got 10 of them, and they've all been completely, consistently loaned out ever since they got them. Just on a continual cycle. So it's people kind of need that connectivity. Not with the library, but with the schools. great benefit that people don't think about in terms of this fiber capacity. Our schools in Oregon had to go all online for standardized testing several years ago, and Independence was the only rural school district that actually managed to comply with that requirement the first several years, because we had the broadband capacity to do it. The school district also has implemented a Tele-Dentistry program where they go into the schools and do dental checkups, like literally in the schools, in the cafeteria, and they send everything up to a dentist in Portland to review the X-rays and everything, like right there. And then, okay, where do we take it next? Now we're focusing on digital skilling in a more specific way. We just got an AmeriCorps Vista who started on Monday. She's going to be spending a year developing digital skilling programs, both at the low level, here's an email address, here's what you do with it, but also talking to employers about the digital skills they need that make people more competitive for jobs, and developing programming around that, looking at fully online, fully remote jobs, both entry level and higher level. What are those skills? What do people need to do to get access to those jobs, and developing some programming around that? Because, we can't necessarily bring, a giant software engineering firm to Independence, but if we can get people who already live in Independence access to those higher wage jobs through remote work, that's a win. That's getting them a higher wage job. They don't have to leave town for it. That's building that community that we need. And then a real specific project that was a benefit of our fiber system during COVID, we got a grant. Obviously remote learning was a critical thing during COVID. We had the fiber system, so that was a great starting point. But there's a lot of kids that lived outside of town in the school district, and there's a bunch of kids in the district who couldn't afford internet. So we got a grant from the state to create a hardline connection for every kid who qualifies for free and reduced lunch and said they couldn't afford an internet connection for this last school year. So we connected, I believe it was just under 100 families. It was about 170 kids, to a hardline in-home internet connection with a modem router to make sure that they had access. The school sent everybody home with iPads, but if you don't have anything any way of connecting at home, then what's the point? So then the other question is, well, okay, what if this keeps going after this school year? So we built out 25 Wi-Fi zones throughout Independence and Monmouth, and we targeted them on low-income areas, low-income housing developments, because if somebody moves to town, during this time and doesn't get, the hardline access, or it's next year and things go crazy again, and we don't have the ability to just give them free in-home service, these Wi-Fi zones will be an opportunity for kids to be able to get an access code, get on there for free, and do their schoolwork, even though they may not have a sort of a residential connection per se. And then we also expand the range and the bandwidth of public Wi-Fi at 5 Publix facilities, the library, City Hall, and several parks, which has been a huge benefit. A lot of people go to our Riverview Park to work, to enjoy themselves. It was a place that people from outside of town would come to park their cars and study. So it was really important to have that ability and to turn around quickly. That was the other thing, is we were able to do this really quickly because we already had the fiber throughout our entire community. And then we built a generator and a solar powered comms trailer so that we could do pop-up zones if necessary, for learning and for resiliency. We could either plug it into an existing internet connection, or it's got a cell connector, runs on a generator or solar power. It's a really great tool for resiliency. And so the next thing that's going to be coming up is our Northwest Ag Innovation Hub. That's what Cara and Alex are going to talk about. Our ag innovation work has really evolved and developed, I'd say, over the last 5 years, and especially the last year or two. But again, the goal is, pull partners together, develop a network of farmers. This needs to be farmer oriented, pull the problems from the farmers, because usually the tech world is kind of developing technology and then trying to figure out what to do with it, which is not useful for the people with the problems. So get the people with the problems, getting them out there and getting connected to solutions, get them identifying, the farmer, the promising opportunities, and then accelerate them to create jobs. So, that's kind of a quick overview of how we take that holistic perspective. Now, I want to, this is kind of my contact info if you're ever interested in getting in touch, happy to talk more. But I'm going to turn it over to Cara Snow from the Technology Association of Oregon.
I work for the Technology Association of Oregon, and it's probably important to really quickly tell you what that is. We're a statewide tech association, so we represent the technology industry, and our economic development efforts are focused predominantly on technology. And if you look at the way our membership is distributed, it is 80% in Portland and 20% around the rest of the state. So it is much more heavily focused in our urban areas than in our rural. And we have been working with Shawn in the City of Independence for probably close to 8 or 9 years. And a lot of it has been in the context of smart cities. And so I'm going to have Shawn go to my next slide, and I will tell y'all what you're seeing. Some of you may have seen a couple of years ago at this same conference in the Smart Cities session, a gentleman named Corey Murphy, who is with the city, with Multnomah County, had worked with the Technology Association of Oregon to create a unhackathon, which meant it wasn't the 48 hours in a room, that was really focused on how you can support folks in the Black and Brown community that, much like rural areas of the state, also did not have great access to the internet. So there's these digital deserts within the city. And within that concept of this unhackathon, we'll go on to the next slide, we had come up with a Venn diagram, because we're technologists and we love nothing more than a Venn diagram. It's how we basically explain our entire lives, where it was the local tech community, which we represent, public sector partners, which was the county in this initial concept stage, and then community-based organizations that were serving communities of color to find innovative solutions to challenging problems that the organizations serving these communities were facing. And so it was meant to be a community collaborative problem-solving project. And because Shawn is familiar with our work, he sort of followed along with what we were doing. And if you go to the next slide, you can see what we were trying to achieve. So BTC stands for Breaking the Code, which was what we called our hackathon, building partnerships, integrating and upgrading technology for the community-based organizations for service delivery, practicing innovation through community collab, public demonstration of digital inclusion, and breaking down some barriers. And we did this project over the course of a week in person. And what was great is we helped 3 organizations solve 4 problems. And each of those organizations that do serve an urban Black or Brown constituency then received a $25,000 grant from one of our partners' foundations to continue doing the work. And so we felt like we had achieved these objectives, and the community worked very closely. Our tech community worked very closely with the service providers and Black and Brown communities to build these solutions. And so Shawn was like, hey, this is interesting. What if we sort of flipped this script a little bit and looked at it as the rural urban divide and talked about how we could do some kind of community collaborative innovation event where ag was centered. And so if Shawn goes to the next slide, you can see that we basically took the Venn diagram and we replaced those nonprofits with local farmers and growers. And instead of, finding solutions for these nonprofits, we were going to find solutions that are facing farmers in the Mid-Willamette Valley. And Alex will touch on this a little bit, but Oregon has a great diversity of crops. I think it's over 270, and I think over 170 of them grow in this 3-county area that we refer to as the Mid-Willamette Valley. And so there's no one crop that is super, super predominant, like you would see a corn or a soybean, unless you count wine. But wine and food you consume and animals you grow to eat are considered completely separate. But we went out into the community, which was growers, Alex and Shawn and I, on a road show, and basically asked, like, what are the biggest challenges you have from a tech standpoint? And how could those be addressed? And so on the next slide, you can see our challenge objectives were the same. So instead of having a Breaking the Code hackathon or design sprint, we were going to do the Ag Innovation Challenge. So again, we were focusing on increasing partnerships, like you're looking at one right now, 3 organizations that had not worked together in this way previously. Creating tech solutions for farmers with the goal of centering their business operations to increase revenue or operational efficiency so that the growers were really becoming more productive. And then to Shawn's point, potentially spinning out businesses, which were then creating additional jobs in the Tri-County area and the Mid-Willamette Valley. And we were practicing innovation through community collaboration, because a lot of our tech folks think they know ag, but they actually don't. And most of our producers are super fantastic, innovative entrepreneurs who don't think of themselves that way. So this was really an interesting way to break down these barriers. And we did get to understand the challenges of having a digitally inclusive ecosystem. And I think one of my favorite stories was Alex and I toured a dairy. And for those of you that are not aware of how milking data is tracked for all sorts of purposes on the regulatory side, you know, there's basically 15,000 data points being collected per cow, per milking, 3 times a day. And I was like, wow, it's like that being uploaded to the cloud. And the son of the gentleman that owns this farm laughed and was like, do you think I can get it to the cloud from out here? We don't have enough bandwidth for that. He's basically storing it on a server in his own building. And I was like, this is really interesting. So we came in with these objectives. We interviewed growers for like 6 months. And Shawn, if you go on to the next slide, we were then ready to do our unhackathon or our design sprint, which was scheduled for the end of March 2020. And we had some awesome challenges. And I like to give the distinction because some people are like, what's a design sprint? A design sprint and a hackathon are essentially the same thing. A hackathon is a short 48-hour event. Programmers get together. They generally stay in one room. They come up with a solution. It is not particularly conducive to a lot of folks that have jobs or that maybe aren't comfortable spending the night in a random university's gymnasium. We felt like it was be more inclusive if we created it as an actual agile development process. I'm definitely getting into like the tech part of my job, but it's just basically a week where you're using design thinking to solve these complex problems in an iterative fashion where you're continuing to get feedback from the folks that you are developing the solution for. So if we go on to the next slide, we took what was supposed to be a week in person and we shifted it after we basically had to when the entire world shut down online. So we had 95 people participate from 10 different states because this was, again, before Zoom fatigue had sunk in. We have 5 challenges that we'll see next. And we basically had subject matter expert every day talking about one of the challenges. Alex and I hosted office hours on Zoom so that folks could hear the challenge. And then as you can see, they're going to map out their problem, ideate, pick a solution to turn it into a feasible hypothesis or in our world language, an MVP, a minimal viable product. They're going to do a high fidelity prototype, which means it may or may not be actually working because it's really hard to do this in 4 days. And then day 5, you test it, you share it, and then in theory, you start back again on day 1 with the feedback you get, but we end after a week. So we set this up, we had it online, and our 5 challenges are on the next slide. And this is that's my dog. I think it's my favorite part of this presentation. So we were looking, how do you produce more clean grass seed? So if you go back to creating operational efficiency or greater revenue, the cleanliness of grass seed, the purity of grass seed greatly affects its price per pound and what somebody can make. We had a pitch for wine goggles. So we talked about how grape growing is considered a little bit differently, but grapes and wine are produced in every state in the country and in most countries in the world. So this one actually has a hugely viable market. And wine goggles are not what happens when you drink too much. It is a way to look at the color spectrum of grapes to determine whether or not they're ready for harvest. And if they are then on the sorting table, should they just be ditched? So then in theory, you're creating higher quality wine and potentially higher yield. We looked at the ag approval process. From our friends at the dairy, we found out that there are like 23 entities that you have to enter information into in order to complete your regulatory process on an annual basis. And by making that more automated and figuring out a way to keep those systems talking to each other, you could save a producer over 40 hours a year, which is an entire week's worth of work. We had a What's That Crop app to basically have folks determining in the field what's being grown if they are not farmers. That was more of like a touristy play. And then the Agricultural Data Hub, that goes back to how do we use publicly available data that's collected by the state from a bunch of different agencies to potentially figure out like a burning question in the state of Oregon, which is how many acres are actually being farmed, because nobody tracks that, including the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And so this became really interesting. Like, could you use fertilizer information or wastewater potentially to figure out how many acres are actually being farmed. So these were the challenges that we went in with. And Shawn, if you go to the next slide, our winner was seeing the world through grape colored glasses. And this team was actually based out of Ohio. And go on to the next slide. They created chroma color correcting glasses, and they did exactly what our vintner, our grape grower wanted, something that was disposable, maybe lasted for 2 growing seasons, that you could see the different color spectrum of the grapes. And then on the last slide, you can see what their wine goggles solutions was. They loved it. It was fun. They had a great time. And so out of this, we were like, okay, if we had to create a viable business, this could be the one if we could get investment. So that was our challenge. And then if you go to my next slide, I may almost be done. So yeah, so we completed our first in-town unhackathon. That actually should say 2018. And then the City of Independence wanted to create the rural version in 2019. So we spent 2019 and the beginning of 2020 interviewing farmers. We hosted our Ag Innovation Challenge, and it went really well. And we were a very interesting partnership that had not really been seen before in the state, particularly around this concept of ag innovation. And so coming out of that Ag Innovation Challenge, Shawn then pulled in our friend Alex at SEDCOR and said, hey, I think this could be an interesting EDA grant for us to use the concept behind the Ag Innovation Challenge and the building of bridges between urban and rural to build this Northwest Ag Innovation Hub. So we are now hosting 2 Ag Innovation Design Sprints annually as part of this grant delivery to create the Northwest Ag Innovation Hub. And this is where I bridge it over and hand it to Alex with SEDCOR, who talks about how we are moving from a week-long event where we're trying to produce tech for farmers into a larger economic development play to create an ag innovation hub in the Mid-Willamette Valley.
Perfect segue. Thanks, Shawn, for already having my slides up. My name is Alex Paraskevas. I work for an organization called SEDCOR. We're the Strategic Economic Development Corporation. We're a regional economic development organization that covers Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties. I won't necessarily go through all the details of how I got here, but suffice it to say that I've sort of mentored under Shawn. He wrote a grant to kind of start to hire a position to do this kind of work, realized that there's not a lot of farming within city limits, and thought that a partnership with SEDCOR made more sense in terms of sort of countywide and 3 countywide coverage. So I cover Polk County, where Independence is. And I also, just as a sidebar, I don't even drink the Kool-Aid. I bathe in the Kool-Aid of Independence and all the cool things that are happening here. And I moved here about 4 months after I started at SEDCOR. So it is a fantastic place. And again, open invite to come visit us and drink a beer. I'll talk a little. So SEDCOR, we're a 39-year-old organization. You know, we're a kind of traditional economic development in a lot of ways, where sort of, you know, we focus on the same things that most other economic development organizations focus on, and Shawn touched on them around business retention, expansion, recruitment, and entrepreneurship. This one, kind of the ag bit for us, covers sort of all of it because we are, you know, we're a very agricultural region. Though, as I tell everybody, when I started at SEDCOR, I didn't know anything about agriculture. And so part of this is an opportunity to take other people on the same sort of spiritual journey that I've taken on as sort of a dyed-in-the-wool advocate for Oregon ag. So just to give you a little context, and Shawn, if you can advance the next and just burn through that list right quick for me, please. We're a high-value specialty crop region. So what Cara referenced, a lot of crops. So we have 170 or so things that are grown in our 3-county region, and about 225, 230 in the state. We're predominantly family farms, 96.7%, 475 acre average farm size. These are all, I think, trend with national statistics. So we're not an outlier, except for the specialty crop region. Like, we're not a corn and soy kind of place. In our county specifically, a lot of grass seed, but I mean, that's even then, it's not the only thing. And what we refer to at SEDCOR is that we have a 3-dimensional supply chain. So we grow the things, we harvest the things, we manufacture the harvesting equipment, we do the value add processing, we manufacture the value add processing equipment, then we also do the warehouse and distribution. And then, of course, you know, the consumer products is a pretty fantastic place. We have 750 wineries in the state. We drink a lot of beer. it's pretty solid. So that's just to give you a little bit of context. And the approach when we're talking about ecosystem building and whatnot is really learning all of these things. I've spent 3 years sort of developing on-farm relationships, and there is probably some, I would say, stereotypical reticence for technology amongst farmers because the opportunity costs are high. If you can go to the next slide, Shawn. We talk about farmers needing to be adaptive and creative, and they know this because they're internationally competitive. And I think the average Oregonian, and I put myself right at the top of that list, had no idea sort of that these were a bunch of internationally competitive small businesses, dotting our valley, and that they were all. It's a lot more difficult than anybody gives it credit for, I think. We talk a lot about the challenges of tech rarely goes rural. The R&D costs are high, and I heard the first presenter, talked about sort of, bigger farms have more money to do more R&D and have a higher adoption of technology. And so we're trying to kind of go to the smaller farms and make sure that they have the same access to the, same thinking, same technologies, et cetera. And also too, the thing that I heard, especially when I started, was, you try something and a lot of times you're the de facto beta tester. So you're not being compensated, for a new app, a new sensor, a new whatever, if it doesn't work right. You're just trying things, giving feedback to the company, and they're refining their product, but sort of at no benefit to the farmer. And so we thought that probably needed to change. Coupled that with sort of the designs already happening. And I think this looks linear as Shawn presents about the City of Independence, and then Cara talks about the design sprints, and then I'm talking about sort of this Northwest Ag Innovation Hub. And as probably everybody knows, right, none of this it's all murky, right? It's all multi-layered. It's a little bit, it's not quite as clean and clear cut, but these are kind of the things that we saw. And then at the same time, and I wish I could have another 30 minutes to talk about it, right, is we got introduced to Pete Nelson and the Ag Launch Initiative that's out of Memphis, Tennessee. And they're taking this really farmer-driven and farmer-centric approach to product development. And for me, it resonated very deeply because it's about getting farmers in at the ground floor to help refine products. And that model, they've been working on it for 5 or 6 years. And when we met, Pete was actually out here last week, and we were doing a bunch of farm tours. He came out from Memphis to the Willamette Valley. He was reminding me that I was grinning like an idiot on the Zoom call when we first met, because he was talking about all these same challenges that he was seeing for Memphis farmers, coupled with the fact that they don't have the high value crop diversity, and that's what he was looking for. But they have created a series of programming. So they do kind of 2 parts of the marketplace of Ag Tech Accelerator, plus the whole thing is centered on farmers. And so they have a farmer network that helps vet the companies, vet the startups, et cetera, and then get an equity stake. And I think that's the real interesting key to all this. And so when I saw that, I was, and we saw that, we were really excited because this is kind of similar in the thinking that we have and sort of the makeup of the farms that we have. So we applied to the Economic Development Administration Build a Scale program to build the Northwest Ag Innovation Hub. And it's not a physical thing, but it's a series of programming and a network built to meet 2 sides of the ag tech marketplace. We're trying to help startups grow and solve real on-farm problems, increase farm profitability through technology, and through an equity portfolio for farmers. So the farmers have a stake in all of these startups. So that's really the grant, is to bring that ag launch model to this area. At the same time, work with TAO, the Technology Association of Oregon, to build design sprints and to teach, I would say teach, and also probably parenthetically preach Oregon ag to Portland, Eugene, and Bend, maybe the folks that don't think about ag as complicated, expensive, risky, crazy as it actually is. So the National Farmer Network from Ag Launch is, as you can, it's early adopter farmers, probably up to 40 right now, and hopefully soon to add 4 or 5 farmers from the Willamette Valley into this network. They get to incubate some of these startups on farm. And then they also get to pick, like I said, which ones go into the accelerator. They become sort of de facto chief technical officers in a lot of ways. And Pete tells a story that they've had 30 companies go through, I want to say it's around like $60 or $70 million of investment across 30 even more than that. And what he says to a company, when they get to the farm within the first 30 minutes, they're kind of like, uh-oh, this is way harder, way more complicated. Our solution doesn't necessarily work. And when we met, Pete was talking about the Silicon Valley model, sort of product development especially for ag tech, is a little bit out of sync. And that really resonated with me too, because I'd heard that from at least a dozen farmers, where sort of the iterate, constantly fail fast method for product development and technology development doesn't necessarily work. And so Ag Launch realized that if you put farmers at the beginning of the product development cycle, you sort of get more winners on the back end. And that is exactly in line with what I've heard from Willamette Valley farmers. So in the same vein, and this has been talked about probably 2 or 3 times, right, and this is a perfect Ag Launch slide, right, where this is the reason for all of this, right? So we're trying to build rural prosperity through more successful farmers, more technology. The early adopters, try things out, the businesses scale, you exit, the sort of farmers are always invest back in their own communities, to all of them. But then of course you start with the funding piece, startups start again, and the farmer network keeps getting that, keeps growing, keeps getting that equity stake, and keeps building better products. And I think that's just like, it's a cycle. We just want to hop on that cycle train. So in the same vein, we're also trying to not just focus on the earliest adopters, but we want to make sure that all of our farmers have a resource base in this area. If you call yourself an entrepreneur in downtown Portland or downtown Eugene or downtown Bend, there's a certain resource base and a network that exists, and the same sort of formal networks don't exist. Farmers, obviously certain commodities have commissions and they do different meetings and whatnot, but we want to make sure that, so as an economic development organization, our core book of business is convening people, listening, etc. This is actually no different. We're just focusing at the farm level. So that's most of it. We think that the best way for tech to help the grower is for it to be built by people who take the time to understand the growers and the unique realities they face. I think I've said this probably 100 times. If you heard me talk before, I've said it, every farmer is sort of meteorologist, chemist, mechanic, HR, communications, everything all at once, hundreds of hats, depending on the minute that you're talking to them. And so helping people understand that is important. And our whole goal is to sort of to reference Cara's Venn diagram, right, is to make sure that those, the circles overlap correctly and that there's trust built. And I think that's the piece that I start with. This is all about trust and relationship building, and it's kind of squishy and it's hard to measure, but it's really the core of all of it, because there is, I think, quite a bit of skepticism when it comes to like, oh, look, a shiny new product. Then the farmers are like, yeah, I've seen like 20 of those, and so why is this one different? Why should I spend the money? So we're trying to just kind of cut through all of that. So I'm always happy to talk about this. I can talk forever about this. I'm hugely, hugely passionate about helping solve some of these problems and actually just be useful.
Quick kind of just summary of like, the ideal scenario that this looks like is we're having these ideation events, these kind of getting people engaged and involved and coming up with ideas to solve real problems with agriculture. Some of those turn into, kind of startup companies. The farmer network helps kind of identify the ones that are truly interesting. They get into an accelerator where they get kind of spun up, learning about agriculture, how agriculture works. They get connected with a farmer to do field trials and develop the product, and then connected with a venture arm through Ag Launch to actually get funding and continue to grow and scale the business. That's sort of the ultimate process that Ag Launch has developed, and that we're sort of developing a minor leagues version of that for now, that we can feed up, good prospects to Ag Launch. And then, as we develop, we will eventually kind of get to that same point ourselves. That's kind of the end goal here.
Fingers crossed.
Okay. No, thank you very much. Shawn, you guys did an amazing job. Tree coordination. I wouldn't expected that, but Oregon has his act together.
Thank you very much. This was quite fascinating. Johannes Bauer from Michigan State University. And so we have in the political discussion frequently we are stuck with this notion that there's polarization between people of political visions and interests. And you mentioned multiple times the notion of collaboration, trust, the importance of building those bridges. I was wondering, whether you're capable of addressing sort of political differences, whether the instrumental orientation that you want to achieve a common goal helps you bridge those divides, which would be very encouraging in my view.
Yeah, can I
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think since I'm mostly the boots on the ground for a lot of this work and being on farm, I was on a couple farms yesterday. I was on a half a dozen last week. Political discussions are dicey and frequent and common. The way I talk about it, and Oregon is no different. I think the culture wars are playing out here as well, sort of Portland versus the state. But I've learned very sort of intimately that we can argue about sort of the social programs and whatever else, but ultimately my own personal politics have fallen by the wayside because I've realized that successful communities are built with successful employers employing people in healthy jobs. And I think as long as you start with that and lead with that, I think generally the farmers especially understand, like, that's what we're trying to do here is really just grow the tax base. I mean, that's economic development sort of at its core. It's a little bit crass, but I think, we do a lot of the community development, et cetera. But I mean, really having healthy businesses sort of shoulder the burden for the tax base is really what's important. And I think if we talk about that, it's easy to skip a lot of the uncomfortable conversations. I mean, and also too, I would say that I work with farmers of every stripe. So I worked with super duper left-wing farmers. I work with super duper right-wing farmers. Really, it doesn't matter. It's all about thinking about, sort of one of the most, probably the most progressive farmer in our region. His politics run very right. And you would never know it when you talk to him, about his farming practices. And it's all about sort of environmental and economic sustainability and et cetera like that. But it's still, you become friends on Facebook and you see a whole different side of people, right? And so I think I walk the tightrope sort of every day, but it sort of doesn't matter anymore because as long as we're talking about healthy businesses, successful entrepreneurs, and sort of this, and I don't talk about ecosystem and entrepreneurs necessarily, like it's word choice really matters for this. But that's kind of the way I take it.
Yeah, and I would just add that's frankly one of the reasons I enjoy working for a city is it's problem oriented. And what I always say is gun control and abortion and all that, like, do you want this playground built or do you want this, water pipeline to be built? Those are two very different conversations. And so this is a very practical, hey, you don't have good connectivity on the farm. Let's talk about how to solve that. Or you don't have enough labor. Let's talk about how to solve that. And it like Alex said, it kind of helps skip a lot of the scary stuff.
And I'm going to add as the person that does come from the big city to do these things and represents the folks that sit there. Like, we didn't really harp on it, but we have, I think, leading up to this point, like, we are not doing this. A bunch of technologists in Portland can tell you how you're going to solve your problem. Like, we're doing this because we want to hear what your challenges are. And we want to make you the focal point, and like, we want you to be successful. So all the economic development things that Alex said, and like reframing the conversation that way and saying, because tech is really good at saying, we know exactly how to fix this. And we can see that we have no idea how to fix this. But by like taking that step back, it almost depoliticizes it because it's like, this is really about like how you become more successful. But it took, when I say Alex and I went on farm tours for 6 months, we went on farm tours for 6 months in like Oregon's most pristine winter weather. So like it was an exercise in building that level of trust.
Thank you very much. I think we got a measurement and activity for a call from West Coast, from Middle America. Now we need to go all the way to Florida to get warmed up. It's my pleasure to introduce Raimundo Rodulfo from City of Coral Gables, who has been very strong leader within the NIST GCTC on multiple initiatives. And we thought that some of the challenges and some of the work that they're doing, he can share some of that with us. That would be good for us. Thank you again, Raimundo. Please take it.
Thank you so much, Mo. I'm Raimundo Rodulfo. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and Director of Information Technology with City of Coral Gables, Florida. So a little about our city. We are strategically located in the center of Miami-Dade County. We are the home of the University of Miami. We were founded in 1924 by George Merrick as a garden city or a city beautiful movement. And also Mr. Merrick, he founded the University of Miami, and he founded the Chamber of Commerce at the same time in 1924. So, and a few years later, the Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden was founded too. It's a research institution, and it's an agricultural research institution for conservation located in the south of city of Coral Gables. And there's a lot of research that is being done there. And we are a partner of the Fairchild Botanical Garden, and also they do research with NASA and a lot of universities like University of Miami and other research institutions. So I want to mention that also as an agricultural area in our city. They do a lot of agricultural festivals. They do STEM labs research. As I mentioned, they have a collaboration that is with NASA about growing in the International Space Station. They bring the students from universities, the students from the local schools, and they have an ecosystem of research, conservation, and collaboration with science and academia here in Coral Gables. To the south, we have Homestead and the Redlands. To the west, we have Kendall, also as agricultural areas. We have a farm-to-table movement in our city. We have a farmers market, and a lot of the restaurants, they participate in those collaborations. So a little about me. I started my career in the early 90s as an engineer, as an electrical engineer in telecommunications industry. I worked with Bell South, Motorola, with Siemens, NCR, Agilent, and also Lucent in Silicon Valley and Illinois, and doing projects in Latin America too, building telecommunication networks. So I came to work for City of Coral Gables in 2004, and we have been building an infrastructure from the ground up all these years. In the last 6 years, we can say that we started building more infrastructure that we call today smart cities. Basically, IoT, platforms that provide hyperconnectivity for mobility, for public safety. But all of that builds on that infrastructure that we have been building over the years, a resilient, high-speed network that provides the foundation for all these different projects. So I volunteer with multiple organizations like IEEE, WBAF, with the NIST GCTC. I am a co-chair of the GCTC Data Supercluster and a lot of other organizations. So I wear multiple hats in the city as an industrial engineer, systems engineer, but also on the quality side, doing citywide process improvements, applying Lean Six Sigma and other methodologies. And our city has been recognized over the years recently as a smart city by multiple organizations. So basically we are leveraging technology, innovation, and best practices to improve quality of life. So that's pretty much what we are doing. And that's something that I'm going to talk a little now. So we have a framework or multiple frameworks. It's an architecture with 8 different strategic management frameworks that holistically they allow us to do this roadmap, this journey as a smart city over the years. So we start basically with a vision at the top. It's a vision of implementing Industry 4.0 movements and technologies and trends to quality of life. So we call it Quality 4.0 approach. And at the top is that vision, but that always aligns with the needs and priorities of our community, of our citizens. And of course, with the strategic management goal of the organization as a whole. So basically it's not technology, it is aligning with those strategic goals and projects that improve quality of life in multiple areas. So we have at the top is this vision, but also we have projects on focus areas that I'm going to talk a little later, and also applying quality engineering and management of operations and industrial engineering for quality in operations and efficiencies. and leveraging that network foundation that is very important in South Florida because of the hurricanes and other natural disasters, and having an engineering framework that builds a stack of technologies to provide services to the citizens and to the ecosystem. So basically multiple models and frameworks that they all play together. And the final framework here is about collaboration, about building an ecosystem of collaboration with industry, with academia, with government, with nonprofits. So building that ecosystem is what keeps us always agile and always learning. So continuously learning. That is part of this of this framework, and is key for us to innovate, to talk about innovation in smart cities, as I'm going to do later. So basically, this is the big picture, the macroscopic vision of this strategic management framework architecture. And it covers all those different important topics that I mentioned before. They all play together, and that's what allows us to have from vision to planning and execution, but always having a strategic realignment that happens annually, where we listen to the voice of the customer, the voice of the citizens, and we continuously re-envision, realign our strategies to meet those priorities. So this is the focus areas framework that I mentioned, that at the center of it all is continuous improvement of quality of life, listening to the voice of the customer, customer service, process improvement, innovation. And then you have focus areas like becoming a data-driven organization, concentration of efforts in public safety, public health, and bringing those digital transformation projects in smart applications and enterprise systems to connect the dots in all those different areas, including sustainability, both environmental sustainability, but also our viability as an organization, economic sustainability, the sustainability of our plans, of our smart city plans. So to the right, this is the smart cities engineering framework, where we have a stack of technology. It's the foundation of high-speed communications, a layer of Internet of Things and cyber-physical systems that provides that visibility, high visibility and real-time interfacing with the environment, and the data platform layer, where we aggregate the data, make sense of the data, and provide actionable information for first responders, for urban planners, for city officials, for researchers, and the smart city hub layer, where we deliver that value to the citizens, to the stakeholders, to the customers. And we do it through multiple components like data platforms, Internet of Things, dashboards, and app store, transparency portals, and multiple components like a community intelligence center, where the citizens can engage and participate in these initiatives. And we have at the top is a smart city ecosystem that benefits from that value. So we are a projectized organization. So this is one of the main frameworks. It's a project management, project portfolio management of all these smart city projects. They have enterprise systems, public safety technologies, content management, user experience, citizen engagement components, cyber infrastructure that goes to from fiber optics corridors to wireless communication networks, to public Wi-Fi, to smart buildings, building the smart districts and innovation districts and ecosystem building in urban areas. So all that is part of cyber infrastructure as a whole. And smart city initiatives that are very particular to Industry 4.0 applications. And some of those projects at the beginning, 6 or 7 years ago, they were not part of the major strategic plan of technology, but they were incorporated from cost savings. So by improving the processes in the organization with Lean Six Sigma citywide, we were able to reduce OPEX and operational cost in 10% of technology. We reinvested those cost savings into R&D, into innovation in smart cities. Some of the first IoT projects were funded with those cost savings. And of course, aligning our projects with capital improvement projects, like new buildings, like streetscapes. So making every project in the organization a strategic project that incorporates technology as one of the components. So that's built in the capital improvement project of the city. So this is the ecosystem that I mentioned, the smart city ecosystem of people is people first, people focused, and businesses, organizations like universities or schools or hospitals, and nonprofit organizations. And things, so those smart devices, robotics, sensors, and even the smart devices that the citizens use to engage with our ecosystem. They are part of that Internet of Things and IT systems. And we need to consider today some of those digital personas and AIs as part of the ecosystem. They can interact in real time also with this system. So this is a map of our smart districts. So we have divided the city in multiple smart districts with letters A, B, C, D, E, etc. So this building I am right now is the one that has the highest concentration of smart city technology. It has a lot of fiber optics corridors. It has a wireless point-to-point. It has public Wi-Fi. It has smart poles. It has red light cameras, CCTV cameras, license plate readers, and traffic sensors, vehicle, pedestrian, and multimodal traffic like bicycles and scooters and micromobility. And it has environmental sensors like water canal, water quality sensors, and air quality sensors. So all that plant of infrastructure, you will find it highly concentrated at the geofence of our smart districts, in the perimeter of the city's boundaries, and also in the business development district and the downtown district. And we also have a government district where we have these government buildings. And we also have other areas that the city is growing to, and areas that have been designated as innovation districts. So there's a lot of urban planning and zoning incorporated into this strategy as well to foster innovation and economic growth, entrepreneurship, attract new technology businesses. And that's what is part of the holistic strategy of economic development, urban planning, and technology, and smart cities as a whole. So this is an example of building network resiliency, leveraging standards from IEEE and best practices, and also working together with the university to bring also new technologies like smart microgrids for energy resilience as well, as part of this strategy. To give you an example, during Hurricane Irma in 2017, our city lost 80% of power throughout the city. A lot of communication providers, they lost connectivity, and we had to rely on our city's municipal networks. And because we have a multi-layered network with automated failovers and resilience that goes from fiber optics to wireless point-to-point to metropolitan Ethernet to public Wi-Fi networks to satellite, we had a robust infrastructure that was able to sustain critical services for first responders, for 911, for police, fire. And that happened thanks to that design based on best practices, but also on resilience. So that's something that the IEEE recognized with some case studies and an award that we received on this. And Internet of Things. So that's where we are building that visibility in real time of the environment, of behavioral traffic, and also quality of life parameters in real time. So to give you an example, smart lights that bring a lot of efficiencies in energy consumption, but also bring the real-time control and alerts and data that help us to optimize the management of energy. Also, traffic and parking sensors, and which now became more mobility, smart mobility sensors in our mobility hub project. Public safety sensors of multiple kinds, from smart policing, CCTV, ALPR, speed, red light type of sensors, mostly for traffic safety, which have made a big difference, like reducing crime 40% and reducing traffic accidents 40% in a period of 2 years since the incorporation of this technology. Environmental sensors that goes from air quality sensors, VOC, ppm, CO, CO2 type of parameters, but also water quality sensors and electrochemical sensors in our water canals that gives us from the water elevation to detect flooding, especially during emergency activations of the EOC, but also electrochemical parameters like salinity, resistivity, density, that helps marine biologists, environmental sustainability experts, and also public works engineers to detect other issues like pollution, but also red tides and king tides. And smart devices in general that are part of the ecosystem, smart kiosks that we have in different areas of the city interacting with the citizens directly, and robotics like drones, vehicles. Now we have an autonomous vehicle pilot with Ford and Argo AI. We are part of that, and Lyft recently joined that joint venture. And many other projects that we have that have to do with mobility and with smart vehicles. So we leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to apply those algorithms to our optical sensors data. And with that, we detect foot traffic, vehicle traffic, multimodal traffic of multiple kinds, and also detect the curbside parking occupancy in real time, like which spots are occupied or not, like you see in some of those screens from our server systems. And this is a latest addition to our IoT plant. This is a smart consolidated pole. This pole brings together pretty much all of these different technologies that I mentioned, more than 12 different systems into one single consolidated integrated smart pole. This was implemented this year and is the first of its kind in the United States. And this is the first pilot that you see here in these photos in our financial corridor. And it's bringing a lot of visibility, not only high definition 360 HD cameras, but also it brings environmental sensors, air quality sensors. It brings weather sensors. It also brings automated license plate reader sensors, red light camera sensors, a lot of technology together into one single device, and a nano hotspot for public Wi-Fi. So basically, this is a new consolidated and integrated way of providing all these different services that I mentioned that we deployed over the years in other areas of the city, but in a consolidated way, in a better industrial design, basically that is more aesthetically pleasing and merge and fuses better with the environment and with the city's urban landscape. And this is an example of application of drones and other autonomous systems that goes from, for example, during COVID-19, during monitoring of test sites, of COVID testing sites, or doing cargo delivery during emergency operations, police, fire, or during rescue recon hurricane. During hurricane rescue recon, they are eyes in the sky for first responders, especially on the areas that we have a lot of tree falling, and inspecting rooftops for water damage, inspecting telecommunication towers, also for corrosion and other inspection for structural integrity, and a lot of other applications. And that goes from public safety to public works to IT and many other scenarios. Recently, we used them during incident command post in real time to bring real-time video, but also use it as a way to have a mobile sensing, applying AI to the video feed from live drone sensing to also count density of objects, traffic, etc., or detecting water damage, for example, using AI as well. And smart parking now became smart mobility technologies. So our parking garages are evolving to mobility hubs, smart mobility hubs with mixed use, multimodal transportation use, but also as shared spaces, as sensing structures that can have a hyperconnectivity that will provide the implementation bed for autonomous vehicles, for robotic cargo, and all those technologies that we are hearing today from vertical landing of drones and other autonomous vehicles, and many other capacity that we are providing today. So when we have the need to have it for adoption, they are ready to go. So this is an example of parking guidance systems incorporated with IoT and a lot of automation and detection, mobile apps, digital signage. And they are part of that mobility hub concept. This is LiDAR implementation for right-of-way. So we have almost 300 miles of roads in our city. They have been digitized with LiDAR. And using these LiDAR systems, we have this Cyclomedia 360, 180 technology that have created that digital twin version of our city, where we can run also AI and machine learning to detect, for example, road deterioration or the state or the rating of state of the pavers and flooding issues, also detecting like from potholes to other anomalies that want to be corrected. And we integrate this into our asset management system and to our GIS platforms, and that has a lot of capabilities to optimize the maintenance cycle also. And this is an example of AI use cases that goes from chatbots that we have developed with MIT researchers and other collaborators from STEER Labs to implementation of computer vision and algorithms for multimodal traffic analytics, for traffic studies, for the analysis of the condition of the roads. For example, to finding a missing child in the middle of a crowded event. We use AI for that. To find a child in an event where there were 50,000 people in a street in Miracle Mile during an event, and we were able to find a missing child in just minutes using this kind of technology. So this is a picture of the Smart City Hub. When you have a chance, we invite you to visit our Smart City Hub public platform, coragables.com/smartcity, where you can see in action all those different technologies that I mentioned, like IoT dashboards in real time, open data portals, and many other technologies. This is a picture of our public safety headquarters, where we have many of these technology for monitoring and for control. We have our EOC, we have the Community Intelligence Center, or CIC, and also we have the aggregation of this technology in what we call today the Smart City Hub facility. And this is an example of our new data center, primary data center at the Smart City Hub, but we also have a cloud data center replication, and we have a disaster recovery collocation also, which is very important in South Florida with hurricanes. Enterprise systems incorporate IoT integration today. We are talking about systems for community recreation or systems for asset management, like the ones that integrate with the LiDAR technology. But we also see for electronic permitting, enterprise systems for land management, and enterprise systems for core financial and HR. Basically, they are enterprise business capabilities. They implement that post-modern enterprise systems that have integration with AI and also with big data, and they are ready for technologies like blockchain, for example. And the other ones are digital experience platforms that we are implementing as well, bringing technology that is more interactive, is more improves the user experience, and are mobile ready, of course, responsive, and have that human-computer interaction capacity. This is an example of a horizontal integration systems engineering model, one of the 8 frameworks. And this is what brings everything together. So eliminating silos, pretty much bringing together the data, the analytics capability from all these systems, from IoT to financials to asset management to other partners like universities. So bringing everything together in a topology that allows that integration and best practices, especially interoperability. During COVID-19, this is the way how we use IoT, for example, to track traffic, water quality, and bring that together into crisis management, into emergency management. So that's an example of how we use this technology for crisis management, for emergency management, and for public safety. And this is some of the papers that we have published to IEEE and to other organizations that we collaborate with. And we have a list of all these papers if you want to look at some of the publications. And some of the awards that our team have received for this project. And this is the ecosystem that I mentioned of collaboration, of basically bringing together all the partners from industry, academia, government, and nonprofit, doing a little of what I'm doing today, like learning from everyone and trying to bring a little of what we do to share and to collaborate. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'm open for any question.
Thank you very much, Raimundo. I think the team, there's more to Coral Gables and beaches. The team was going to come visit you for the beach, but I think there's a lot of technology.
Hello, I'm Ali Shakouri from Purdue University. It's quite impressive, the range of the projects. If other cities wants to replicate this, my question is, what is kind of your operating budget? How many people need to be involved in order to do all of this?
Well, I would say that we started small. So we have an IT department today of 24 staff. So I have an amazing team. The first thing that I would do is to build that human capital. So you need the expertise and the skills in your team that can execute this project and do it in a way that is cost efficient. Because otherwise, the most that you rely or you depend on outsourcing, you will have the cost really going high. Of course, you work as a public-private partnership with all the big players in the industry, but you must have this capacity that allows you to do a lot of engineering, design, planning, and strategy in-house too, because otherwise it becomes very costly. So that's what I say that was the first focus that I had in my strategic plan, in my innovation and technology strategic plan, which you can see in this QR code. If you take a photo of that QR code, it will take you to some of those plans. Basically, is to build that human capital, build that amazing team that can execute and plan and engineer and design this project. The other part of it is to maximize efficiencies. So in any government or any organization at all, so you will find a lot of opportunities for improvement and for cost savings and for optimization. That's where you have to bring that industrial engineering, Lean Six Sigma, and other frameworks that allows you to bring a culture around quality, around optimization and efficiency. Then you can reinvest those savings like we did into R&D, innovation. So start small, but very important, always align with the needs and priorities of your community. So the first thing you have to do is to understand what are those priorities, what are those needs, and have quick wins along the way, satisfying those needs. So the community understands the value of smart cities.
Thank you very much, Raimundo. And looking forward, I think, for engagement from that level.